We think we know how the Victorians sounded, but what we hear today isn't quite accurate. Welcome to How the Victorians Really Spoke.
Welcome to Literally Victorian with your host, Matthew Lee Hanson.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Matthew and I'm so glad to be with you once again. When we imagine the Victorian age, we often imagine the way it sounded. Formal, measured and precise. A voice shaped by structure and restraint. But how accurate is that impression? And more importantly, how did people in the Victorian era actually speak? In their everyday lives? Much of what we think we know about Victorian speech comes from literature. Writers such as Charles Dickens or Charlotte Bronte present dialogue that feels structured, even theatrical. Sentences are complete. Grammar is consistent. Speech is shaped to be read. But this is important. Written dialogue is not a perfect reflection of spoken language. Even in the 19th century, people did not speak exactly as they were written. Writers made choices. They clarified speech. They refined it. They shaped it for the reader. So what we inherit is not a recording of voices, but an interpretation of them. Among the middle and upper classes, speech was expected to be controlled. Not only correct, but appropriate. Sentences tended to be longer, more deliberate. There was less tolerance for interruption, slang or imprecision. To speak well was not simply a skill. It was a signal of education, of upbringing, of social position. A person could reveal a great deal about themselves simply through the way they spoke. Listen to this example of going to a shop. In modern speech, we would probably hear it like, "I went to the shop, but they were closed." In Victorian speech, "I ventured forth to the apothecary with the utmost haste, only to find the shutter down and the establishment quite devoid of life." This version of speech was not universal. Victorian society was deeply divided by class, and language reflected that. Working class speech was often shorter, more direct, and less concerned with formal structure. It was also heavily shaped by region. In London alone, different districts produced different accents, different rhythms, and different vocabularies. What we now think of as Cockney was already forming, dropping sounds, altering pronunciation, creating expressions that did not appear in formal writing. So while one part of society spoke with restraint, another spoke with flexibility. One of the most distinctive features of Victorian speech was not how much was said, but how much was not. Certain subjects were not addressed directly. Instead, they were softened, reframed, or avoided entirely. Meaning was often carried through implication. A sentence might appear simple, but contain layers of understanding. This created a style of communication that relied on shared awareness. People understood what was meant without it needing to be stated. Conversation itself carried a certain formality. It was not entirely spontaneous. In many settings, it was structured. There were expectations: when to speak, how long to speak, and what could be said. Politeness was not optional. It shaped the rhythm of interaction. Even disagreement was often expressed carefully. Direct confrontation was usually avoided, and yet, as with many aspects of Victorian life, there was a difference between expectation and reality. Not everyone spoke in long, careful sentences. Not everyone followed the same rules. Informal speech existed everywhere, in homes, in workplaces, in the streets. People interrupted, They shortened words. They spoke quickly. Much of this simply wasn't recorded, because it wasn't considered appropriate to preserve. The Victorian period was also a time of change. Education was expanding. Literacy was increasing. As more people learned to read and write, language began to standardize. But speech lagged behind. People might write formally, yet speak informally. This created a gap between written and spoken language, one that we still experience today. Some elements of Victorian speech have not disappeared. Politeness remains. So does the idea that speech reflects something deeper than just meaning. We still adjust how we speak depending on setting, audience, and expectation. The difference is we do so more flexibly. The Victorian voice was not a single sound. It was shaped by class, by education, and by circumstance. What we remember today is only one version of it, the most formal, the most structured. But beyond that, there existed something far more varied, a way of speaking that was lived, not written. And like the era itself, it was more complex than it first appeared. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And during your day tomorrow, why not think about how you speak? Try structuring a sentence more formally than you might normally do it. Till next time, farewell.